Kia ora and welcome back to B2B Inspired. I'm really excited by the conversation we're about to have today. Myself, I come from a background of engineering. I've always been involved in techie, specky, weird businesses. And one of the things that I love about B2B is how many of them are hiding in plain sight. Now, we're joined today by John Cochrane, who has a deep and colourful career in the space of manufacturing. And we're here to talk about manufacturing in New Zealand, its presence on the world stage, and what we can do as a nation of manufacturers to really sort of level up here. So, John, thank you so much.
Dale, really my pleasure to be here. Thank you. Deep and colorful. I like that too. Thanks.
Yeah, we'll take that. We'll keep it in the back pocket. So first and foremost, tell us a little bit about John. What's your background? Take
Well,
us
I
away.
think first thing the audience is going to hear is a residual American accent.
Yep.
Can't get away from that. So yes, I grew up in the U.S., in Los Angeles, had a very idyllic Southern California childhood, you can say, and came to New Zealand in 1999, expecting to only stay here for a year. But, the country gets its hooks into you, and fell in love with a job I had at the time and the place, and have stayed. And so New Zealand is absolutely home now.
Oh, fantastic. And just take us through a little bit, some of the businesses that you've been involved in New Zealand, some of the organizations you've been involved in as well, because you've seen it from a few different angles, right?
Yes, that's right. So since arriving in New Zealand, what brought me here was a job opportunity. I was, which is a great part of the story, I think, was a sole U.S.-based employee of a Christchurch technology company.
Yep.
And did that for about 2 years in the U.S. And then I got a phone call one day and said, hey, what would I think about coming to New Zealand, again, for that 1 year?
Yeah.
And I said, sure, why not? Packed everything up, came here. And about 6 months into it, convinced myself that I really wanted to stay. So that was a company down in Christchurch that's developed and sold complex technologies, handheld instruments, electronics for diagnosing faults in industrial machinery, quite a niche industry. Then we successfully sold that business. Mm-hmm. An opportunity came up to go into the public sector. So NZTE, I was a trade commissioner in China for 5 years.
Wow.
And that was also a focus on the manufacturing sector and manufactured products. Came back after that and settled here in Auckland. And for most of the time have been with a company called Faction, formerly part of Fisher & Paykel Appliances.
Yeah, which is how we came to know each other.
That's right.
And you've recently achieved what you needed to achieve there, and it's time for the next chapter. Is that right?
It is, yeah. I guess we can get into that through the conversation. But yeah, it was 7 years, 7 and a bit.
Yeah.
And quite an interesting journey through the COVID years and border closures and all those things. But yes, now time for something new and different.
Fantastic. So how did you end up in the manufacturing space? Was it a passion from way back? Did you stumble into it?
I would say luck has a lot to do with it. But as a kid growing up, a bit of a tinkerer, you might say, loved things mechanical, lawnmowers, motorcycles, mini bikes, bicycles, what have you. But I was really lucky that my first real job in the U.S. was in semiconductor research and development.
Okay.
So highly and critically technical.
Yeah.
So I started my career at Xerox. People familiar with the Silicon Valley story would know Xerox PARC, Palo Alto Research Center. Mm-hmm. I worked as part of inside the Southern California division of that. So surrounded by incredibly gifted, intelligent engineers working on cutting edge technology.
And how did you then come to hook into a business based out of Christchurch? I just want to understand that.
Well, that I think is an interesting part of the New Zealand story is just travel and being out there in the world. So when I was living in LA, I met a Kiwi fellow, a Kiwi couple in fact, became friends. And It wasn't until several years later that friendship emerged into a job opportunity to be that one trusted guy, the jack of all trades who could help them out in the U.S.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting there that there's a very, very tight personal connection, a friendship that actually then turns into someone of your caliber and your experience actually coming and calling New Zealand home. I think that we're going to get to a point in the conversation here today where that I think is going to echo with some of the the themes that we'll talk about, because certainly one of the things that I think we observe with New Zealand manufacturing businesses is there's a likability aspect to
Most
the way
definitely.
that New Zealand trades and shows up, that when done well, definitely is a magnet that pulls people and business and investment towards us. So tell us a little bit about your time at Faction, if you will. I mean, because it's a business. We've had a lot of very interesting conversations about it, and I mean, fascinating in what you were running there.
Yeah. No, it really interesting story. So, came back from China, worked in kind of a contract role with city government here for a wee while, which allowed me to build up a good professional network in the city and to get to know people and kind of get a feel, since Auckland wasn't where I'd come from. Christchurch was my former home. So I started looking to get back into private sector, and I wanted to try and find something, and again, manufacturing, ideally high-tech space. But another part of my career had become quite focused on China. So where do the two lines kind of intersect, the manufacturing technology and China? And that's where Faction came along. So again, as mentioned, Faction was part of Fisher & Paykel Appliances. Faction, the tagline we like to use is, we make the machines that make your machines.
Yep.
So the factory machinery that goes into the factories that build the dish drawers and the refrigerators and the cooktops and things. So very bespoke. Most every project is a one-off. You don't get many repeats, and the customer requirements are getting more and more demanding all the time. Higher performance, lower cost, all of that.
One of the things that always amazed me there was when you look at the scale and complexity of some of those systems that you guys were developing, the fact that it was a New Zealand-based business that could solve those problems always struck me as remarkable. So what is it about the mindset or the worldview here in New Zealand that actually lets us genuinely play on the world stage with some of these really innovative spaces?
Yeah, well, I think I have to give all due credit to Fisher & Paykel Appliances and the greater Fisher & Paykel organization for their culture of innovation and ingenuity that's been around for decades. And so, of course, we were imbued with that DNA as well. So the way it was told to me, because, of course, it predates my involvement, is that when Fisher & Paykel wanted to, say, debut a new product, but do it in a kind of, shall we say, secretive way, you're looking at new product innovations. Think about the dish drawer back when it was first introduced. There was nothing like that on the market. Well, how do you do that in a secretive way, protect your IP, be able to get to market, and still be a relatively, compared to global competitors, a low-volume manufacturer? The only way you can do that is with very highly flexible production lines, which was unique to the New Zealand and Australasian manufacturing environment. So rather than getting it outsourced, Fisher & Paykel executives decided we had to develop this capability in-house.
So that's interesting then, because when you talk about the need for flexibility, does that come from scale here in New Zealand? You know, we're not producing the same piece of equipment for millions and millions and millions of products. We need the ability to do smaller batches and be more flexible. Is that sort of where that came from?
That's right.
Yeah.
I mean, home appliance industry in many ways mirrors what happens in the automotive industry. Is you have common platforms as such, but still you need different dimensional sizes, different finishes, and so on. So, but of course, within the economics of manufacturing, you want to minimize the labor costs, you want to minimize floor space, of course, minimize the capital expense as well. So pieces of machinery, machine trains that then can do multiple things, pay dividends.
Fantastic. So I think at this point, hopefully the people listening have got a fair sense of scale of the complexity of the environment that you've come from. What do you see what is the hallmark of something that you would class as high-tech or complex in the manufacturing space?
When I think about complex, I have to reflect on a framework that I was only exposed to not that many years ago in the Kunivin, sort of 4 or 5 quadrants or 5 spaces.
Okay.
You know, you've got simple or clear, complicated, and complex. Complex, I guess another way of describing that, perhaps with a bit of a cliche, is where you've got multiple unknown unknowns. You can have known unknowns and then the unknown unknowns.
Okay.
So you're not fully into the chaos mode where nothing is figure-outable, but again, you're working in a space where it's not been done before. Yes, there's elements that might have been done before, but this thing that you need to create has not been made before. And working in our kind of environment, there's no second chance. There's no prototype. There's no MVP and then do it again.
Yeah.
You've got to deliver a working, functional, production-worthy prototype, basically.
Okay.
So highly, highly complex.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I suppose you have a slightly unique perspective to look back at New Zealand, coming from the US, having spent so much time in China and also being on the ground here. Where does New Zealand sit on the world stage in that? How good are we at complex? How good are we at complex manufacturing?
I think when it comes to let's talk about just the engineering piece for a moment, kind of keep it to that definition.
Yeah.
I think just awesome, phenomenal. Again, as a person who has worked in multiple markets and again has had engineering capabilities assessed from potential investors and so on, there is something about just the New Zealand approach to, A, we'll give it a go, and B, to think outside that square. I know I'm destroying cliches again out there, but it's so true. It's just part of the New Zealand DNA, and it's just recognized worldwide. Yeah.
I'm going to draw a parallel there, though, because I think we do have that, call it number 8 wire, call it, innovation driven from distance and isolation. We do have, I think, a reputation there. But I think we also, as a collective body of businesses, have a slight Achilles heel in the way that we actually go and show up with confidence. And this is something that we were talking about before. So if the innovation is the good wolf,
yeah.
that confidence piece, or the way that we actually show up and communicate, that feels like the bad wolf, to finish the analogy there. What's your take on that?
Oh, I completely agree. I think, a business itself is a complex machine, or in some cases people would refer to it as a living organism.
Yeah.
And getting business structure right relative to the talent and the capabilities in that business is every bit as important as getting the finished product right. Especially where export markets and overseas markets are concerned. All the more so, it's about selling who you are as a business, as a company, as a people, as a tribe, shall we say, than just selling the widget, the product. And I think that's where there's still a lot of room to grow.
I remember talking to you about, at one point that a client of yours in the past had described the nature of the business as it's like working with the Germans, but with a sense of humor.
Yes, that's right.
So I'm really interested in that, because the personality aspect of that is something which I don't think makes it to the forefront that often, if I'm honest. And those businesses that do kind of skyrocket, they've lent into that. But what holds New Zealand businesses or manufacturers back from showing more personality and from leading with that?
Yeah, I think a little bit is just the good old Kiwi humility, which is a good thing in many cases. But there's a time where, again, you've got to put on, whether it's the black jersey or something, and bring some roar into it, bring some voice, bring a haka into it, so to speak. No, I mean, I really love telling that story, because about the German engineering, the German quality, but with a sense of humor. Yeah. Because the man who spoke that to us was initially not wanting to do business with us.
Okay.
So he was, the decision came from above. He was more or less the project manager responsible for the outcome. Yeah. But when the project was finally delivered, he was delighted, and he became later one of our strongest champions and advocates inside that company. So understanding that, especially the more expensive, the more committed that buying decision is. The old, again, another cliche out there, people, it's not companies buying from companies, people buying from people. Yeah. And they really, really want to know the people. And I have to say, I guess to add to that is, where possible, bringing the companies or the customers' representatives into New Zealand whenever possible is a great game changer as well. Okay. Let them experience the country, whether it's the landscapes, the food, the hospitality, the sense of humor, all of that. Really, really helpful.
So the advice there is if you're sitting on a big deal, get them on a flight.
Yes, yes.
Wow. Okay.
I remember telling one executive from America, he was doing a bit of a triangular global journey, and he was coming from China to New Zealand. And I said, make sure you must fly Air New Zealand. I said, that's part of the brand experience.
Yes, yeah.
And he did. He listened, and he was very, very happy with that.
Enjoyed the safety video.
Yes.
Hopefully got a sky couch or something better.
Yeah.
Now, there was a phrase that you used just before, which was to bring a little more of a roar and bring the haka into the way that you show up.
Yeah.
We talked about it just before we came into the studio here. And it's actually the first time that I've heard anyone frame the way that we show up in that context.
Yeah.
Walk us back through that story, because I think it's something that will resonate here.
Well, I think, I mean, the first time I heard that, I said I can't claim that quote as my own origination, but it came from an advisor into the New Zealand Trade Enterprise when I was working with NZTE, and just talking about how New Zealand people show up in overseas boardroom environments.
Yeah.
And it was one of those advisors that said that, who had come to appreciate New Zealand's uniqueness, is bring the haka into the boardroom. And particularly when, again, some of our slang, shall we say, or relaxed language is, I've talked to some of my team before about, we often will say in New Zealand, oh, we're looking at this, we're looking at that, which sounds a bit waffly, a bit non-committal.
Yeah.
And even just changing that language a little bit, we are going to, we aim to, we intend to, is a bit more stronger, a bit more intentional, especially when the customer is looking for signals, body language, all of that too. Are they going to spend millions of dollars with you? And they want that commitment.
They do. I mean, it's so interesting with I sat here a few weeks ago with Mike Stokes from Indicator, and we talked through their Mood of the Sales Leader report. And a couple of things strike me here. Mike talked about brand and trust as being one of the biggest differentiators in whether a deal goes forward or not. So coming from, if you are a brand that is communicating a trustworthy position, that you've got that, you've got that tenure, you've got that credibility, that is a thing that hands down will win deals. But the other thing that went hand in hand with that was this piece around New Zealand's investment in sales training.
Yes, yeah.
And what I'm hearing you say there is actually there's probably a bit of a gap there around how New Zealanders and New Zealand businesses, when they are going overseas, how they show up with confidence, how they I don't want to say lean into bravado, because that's not the right approach there, I don't think, but how they actually use language to be compelling, to make sure that they are communicating confidence and action, like you said, rather than, we're thinking about it, or, I mean, it's that time-old story of, we're pretty good at what we do.
Yeah.
And I remember talking to David Downs from New Zealand Story about that, and he said it's one of the most crushing things to hear a Kiwi business say overseas, because you erode the trust.
Yeah, we're a bit all right, kind of thing. And
we don't go so bad.
Yeah.
So that's an area that Kiwi manufacturers do trip up. Where else? What else are the other stumbling blocks that you've observed here?
Well, let me just put a little underscore on that one a bit for a moment. Is one of my former bosses I'd consider like a mentor, who was a real sales expert, I think a natural-born sales expert. Often loved acronyms.
Okay.
And he would often refer to the art of relationship.
Okay.
And the ART being admired, respected, and then trusted.
Okay.
And he used it when he would talk to us about it in that sequence.
Yes.
Is first get something out there that the customer's going to like about you.
Yep.
Are you likable?
Yeah.
As a company, as a people.
Yeah.
And yes, Kiwis by and large are likable
Yeah.
folks. Okay, great. You've done that one, tick. Next, go to the respected piece.
Yeah.
Now, that respected could be engineering competency, financial capabilities to deliver on time and so on, all of that. Then there's that trust. But you can't get to trusted unless you get the first two done.
Yeah.
So, I think that's a lesson I've taken with me for several years since, is to not put the cart before the horse.
Yeah.
Is the trust will come, but first work on the admiration piece and that respect.
Yeah.
And that respect, again, going both ways, is do we invest, so going back to sales training, do we invest in learning about the customer's organization?
Yeah.
Are they on the upside, or are they in a downside? Are they in a sunset industry or in an emerging industry? Are they facing competitive threats? Are they losing market share, or are they in growth mode? And to demonstrate some of that knowledge, to mirror it, even in those conversations, is part of that respect piece.
Yep.
That we've done our homework, we've done our research on the customer.
Yeah. And it's one of those things that doesn't have to be an arduous process anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, there are tools now that an AI tool that will help you prep on not just the industry and the company, but what the person almost had for breakfast,
That's right. Well, even sitting in a boardroom, and if again, LinkedIn tools, whatever they are, is noting a person's career history and referencing that in meetings.
Yeah.
Oh, Bill, I noticed over there you spent 5 years at that company. What were your challenges there? And just letting that person speak to their motivations and drivers. Yeah, so important.
It's interesting to hear that you have a former boss there who's really coached you in that sales space. I mean, it's fascinating. I have two from my own personal journey. One who'd come from IBM, who was, I would regard as one of the most fluent salespeople that I have ever come across. Not that it was natural, it was learned, and it became natural once it was learned. Yeah. And then the other one who I actually fundamentally disagreed with his entire worldview, but the way that he would ask questions and probe was grounding in how polarizing it was, is probably the right way to put that. He was one of those people who wouldn't be afraid to call bullshit on failure.
Yes.
It's very easy to, front up to a sales meeting and, how did you go on your quota last month? And, you can justify why, and you can say, oh, it was the economy that meant we didn't get there and this would happen. And he would always come back to the point, so you failed.
Yeah, that's right. You need those people.
You do need those people. You do need those people.
Yeah.
So there's an area there that Kiwi manufacturers trip up. Anything else that you observe here? And doesn't have to be within the sales space here either. I mean, businesses are, like you said, it's a complex living ecosystem.
Yeah, well, without going into details, we did mention before jumping into the room here that I've recently been invited to sit on a panel for the Minister for Manufacturing Awards, which is giving me some exposure to some amazing companies, large and small. And again, I won't name drop there, but just really, really impressed with what's going on in the manufacturing space. I think pitfalls are, you've always got, I was reading somewhere recently where they were talking about, it was in Annie Duke's book, Quit. Okay. And she was talking about what can you learn from ants and how we often see ants. You've left something out on the counter and there's that trail of ants. And, they're following in that marching line and for all the biological reasons or what have you. But there's always the stray ants that are out there seem to be either not in line. And we look at it, we might think it's a bit humorous. Well, have they lost the plot or what?
Yeah.
But it is actually part of the way that ants work, is there's a ratio of sticking to your knitting, sticking to the expanding, sticking to the exploiting, and another subgroup that explores.
Yeah.
Out there exploring for another food source, another something else. My personal opinion, I'd say, is we probably in New Zealand don't get that ratio right. I think, we think about the inch deep, mile wide, and so on. Mm-hmm. We're probably seeing too many technologies trying to be developed inside a business, trying to be all things for all sorts of people.
Yeah.
Or even conversely, we're beholden to a single sector, a single geography, a single technology. So trying to find that sweet spot of what's that ratio between breadth and depth, I think is something that a lot more business leaders should be looking at.
I didn't expect us to come in here and talk about ants, but
I know.
I love that. But I love that parallel between the way that the natural world has built itself resilience.
Yes.
And how can we apply that into business? I had a similar conversation with a guy just down in the South Island last week about the various different phenotypes that you get within plant populations and how they will vary. Just to come back to the ants, though, is there a golden ratio there? Again, the language there of exploit and explore. Is there a ratio there?
Yeah, well, not that I've discovered yet anyway. Yeah. And I think it really depends probably a bit more on the product or the technology you are trying to promote. So going back to Faction, we did not have as such a repeatable, packageable product to sell.
Yeah.
You're selling expertise.
Yeah.
So it was really a lot more about a very finite customer grouping.
Yeah.
And then as you get embedded within that customer grouping, finding out other pain points within their businesses. So, securing that good, solid relationship.
Yep.
And again, not innovating for innovation's sake, but finding those pain points. And again, that comes back to that customer intimacy, being really, really close with the customer, whether it's being on the shop floor or dinners or boardrooms or a combination of all of that is really understanding what they need next.
And not being afraid to ask for the business.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think that's a thing. Again, we've monitored a lot of that NZ story research, and over the years, we've done a lot of work, I suppose, with Tourism New Zealand and whatever else like that. We're always looking at how is New Zealand perceived globally, and if we compare Australia and New Zealand, we are a business. We're a nation that is afraid to say, "Hey, let's do something together." Hey.
Oh, it's absolutely right. Sorry to interrupt. I think just asking in general, again, asking, can we have dinner? Asking, again, thinking about Fatian, hey, can you give me a guide? Can I walk the factory floor with somebody?
Yeah. Okay,
not with that executive.
Yeah.
But because I really want to see and experience, frankly, even smell sometimes what's going on inside of those factories.
That exact phrase there is so interesting to me, because the visceral experience of walking through somewhere is so fascinating. I mean, I grew up with parents who ran a precision engineering firm, and I can smell Fuchs coolant a mile off. And I love being in an environment where there are... As soon as you're milling metal, there's this wonderful thing that happens in any office, which is that you get this taper trail of swarf, little metal offcuts. And every doorway, there's a triangle from where there's stuff on the floor that gradually wears off on the carpet.
Yes.
But there's so much value in walking the floor.
Yeah.
I mean, we see it all the time as well. It's when we're out and getting under the hood of a business. Yes, we'll go and spend time in the boardroom with whoever we need to talk to there. But the one thing that we'll always kind of specify is, cool, give us an hour to just walk around the business.
That's right.
See how people interact with each other, see the bottlenecks, and you get such a different perspective. And it's, I don't know, I mean, I'm maybe casting unjustified aspersions on nasturtiums, the flower, on other marketers here, but I do really, really hope that there is that appetite to get under the hood and do that piece, because particularly in B2B, particularly in manufacturing, particularly in complex, it's so important. Yeah, it really is.
And I cannot count. I cannot even think in, Fatian and earlier businesses where I've ever had a no, basically. But you just got to have that courage to just ask.
Yeah.
And again, as I said earlier, it's not that particular executive. He or she are not going to give you the tour. But can you give me somebody who's going to give me a walkthrough?
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's so much to be learned from that. Yeah.
And I don't know if you've noticed this in New Zealand as well, but you always get the pink high-vis jacket. You always get the one that no one wants to steal. Yeah. It's so funny. It's always this funny moment whenever we go around, you're like, okay, the pink one's ours. Yeah. The
pink one's for the sales guy. Yeah, that's not an engineer.
You never qualify for the orange or the yellow one. Okay, it's 2026. We have to use the words AI at some point in this conversation. Where do you see that showing up in the manufacturing space?
Now, again, I've only recently started using AI myself, so I would be far from an expert on it. But I think it's just an incredible future to it. At the very least, I'll give you some examples of some uses we've seen in the business cases, just even document comparison. Sometimes you're working in a space where there's an RFP or RFQ process, and AI is great for looking at, because we found cases where even within the customer's documentation, there are conflicts. A quick scan through that. Some cases, some of our businesses in New Zealand are working within a regulatory environment where that needs to be adhered to. So again, that's a great case again. So that research, I've seen AI used a bit more in image representation or confirmation that spatially things will work out in a kind of three-dimensional architectural style environment. Yeah, so helping the customers see how certain machinery might actually fit and operate within their factory environment.
And certainly that contracting piece that's such a solid use case for it. That makes a lot of sense. And I guess it's also one of those areas that it feels contracts are either something that a business is really good at, or is still skinning its knees on. It's still falling over with. Cool. So we've talked about some of the areas that New Zealand trips up. We've talked about where tech is headed within the space to an extent. Where do you see that New Zealand has unfair advantages that it could be leaning into more on the world stage when it comes to manufacturing or engineering?
I'll think of just a combination of hypothetical and real. Again, Dale, you worked with us at FatTN a bit, and we talked at times about sort of the willingness to take on projects that I often said would scare other companies.
Yeah.
And yes, okay, that sounds like it's a little bit of a bit of a laugh, a bit of a tongue-in-cheek way of looking at things. But the reality is there to back it up. I mean, there was a case at FatTN where a customer was in really, really dire straits, shall we say, because another vendor had failed to deliver a project. And they went to us and a few other vendors, the customer did, looking for a rescue. And the other customers either one, refused, or two, priced it so high because it was going to be seen as risky.
Put difficult tax on it.
Yeah. And we came in with a proposition that really just had a longer-term view. And I guess that's probably the thing I want to emphasize is it's not just a one-off deal. Again, what can we do as business leaders, as manufacturing leaders, to cement a relationship with our customers overseas? Yes, we have sometimes the tyranny of distance, but that's again where that trust comes in. Trust, I think, is the great mitigator of that concern around distance. So being able to successfully rescue that project, which in turn helped the customer make sure they delivered a much, much larger program of work on time, led to a lot of repeat business, very good repeat business. Yeah.
I mean, it's a difficult thing to, I suppose, to sell and to convince a client on that it's probably possible. When a surety and certainty is always going to be a thing that will help a sales opportunity tick over. But how do you navigate that sense that we'll give it a crack, we think we've got a solution for it, but it might still fall on its face?
Yeah. Again, it's an and solution. Documentation does come into it. So when a contractor proposal is written, supported by lots of communication, really, really good communication. So even then, things like Teams meetings and so on, or other virtual meeting tools where transcripts are kept and those sorts of things. If you ever do find yourself in a he said, she said moment, you've got at least a record of it. But even with all of that, there's still sometimes where things are just left out. And that's, again, I have to just emphasize, that's where building on credible, durable goodwill, that this wasn't us just cutting corners, this wasn't us forgetting something. Between us, the greater us, we just missed this piece. And now this is a much bigger problem, not a bigger problem, but the problem is not just the vendors to solve, it's ours to solve.
Collectively.
Yeah. And I've never had a customer push back on buying into that concept.
Now, one of the things that we talked about earlier on was the value of bringing someone over into New Zealand to actually experience the place, get a feel for who we are as a collective nation. How else do you see New Zealand manufacturers or exporters even actually putting the made in New Zealand or the brand New Zealand piece to work? Some fantastic resources from within the entered story structure, which I love. But I do sometimes see businesses shying away from saying, we're a Kiwi business and proud. So how do you see people navigating and tackling that?
Well, I think we've got now, compared to, say, several years ago when I was working with the Christchurch business, the benefit of like New Zealand Story. And their asset base, whether it's digital or otherwise, and being able to lead with a New Zealand branded story. Again, talking about that Christchurch business, because we didn't have New Zealand Story at the time, we unashamedly sort of poached, stole, borrowed storytelling from other iconic New Zealand businesses.
Okay.
So again, referencing Air New Zealand, when Air New Zealand originally introduced the Sky Couch, we used that to tell a story. As you know, any airline could have invented that. any airline, right? Why did it take a New Zealand airline and New Zealand thinking to invent something like that, both as not only the technology of how the seat functions, but the customer benefit of having that kind of a seat and that kind of a flying experience. And there were other companies of that time that we continued to say, look at a brand experience, or again, often I have to say the sense of humor, the Kiwi personality coming through, going back to that art, is a bit of an attraction. And I think we can lean into that, absolutely.
I 100% agree with you on that. I think there's often this notion that particularly in really sort of high stakes and technical, that you need to be austere, that you need to be corporate, toe the line. And there are areas where that is absolutely true. Like when you're going through contracting, when you go through the design specifications, you have to be bulletproof. Of course you do. But I think it is still worth coming back to that sense that, people do actually do business with people that they like.
Yes.
The art, as you said, of selling, and that's I see that as an unfair advantage that New Zealand should be exploiting, but often I don't think is.
Yeah, I agree with you, Dale. I think we do it well when we're here talking to each other in the country, but get on a plane, go to the American environment or a European environment or like a Chinese environment, and we lose sight of it. But some of that is just being self-effacing as well, whether and sometimes we talk about Asian environments and, as a more formal culture. And that's great that we can mirror some of that. Yeah. But they also want to see who we are, right? So if that's around a banquet table, as the case may be, or something else, we just be ourselves, and it's okay. Yeah.
What's the most memorable banquet you had in China? Sorry, just a completely left of field question there, because I'm sure there were some stories.
Well, I'll tell you about two. And they both, of course, involved a fair amount of alcohol. But I was still very, very new to visiting China and not really well exposed to the drinking culture and the banqueting culture. But I was invited out to a business, and this is in the early 2000s, and it was a lunch.
Okay.
And it was one of the largest roundtable banquets that I think I've ever participated in. Well over, must have been 30 people around the table.
Wow.
And there was only me and one colleague who were the only non-Chinese at the table. And of course there was the attempt of, we have to toast. And every single person came around and gave us an individual toast. So you've had sort of 30, yes, little, but still powerful shots at lunchtime. And that was one of my introductory. But what happened from that is, again, they see who you are, right? Okay, now it may not be appropriate in every environment, but part of that in that culture at that time was, do they let their guard down? Do they change? Who are they? And that. Because whether it's, shall we say, a junior person or the executive, how do we respond with a different sort of hierarchy and so on?
Yeah.
So with that particular customer, it was interesting in that they never turned into a big customer in terms of a lot of dollars, but they were very loyal and they always became a referenceable customer.
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
You don't know about us? Talk to that gentleman over there.
Yeah.
He'll tell you, why you should be doing business with us. Yeah.
Really good sort of strategic partnership.
Yeah. And there was a similar experience about a year ago, but anyway. But that one, I have to say, was interesting because it was a mixed group around the table.
Yeah.
In China, and including from, I say, mixed around multiple countries around the table. And I was perceived as being probably the foreigner, the non-Chinese with the most China experience. So they were all the other foreigners were watching me. What is John going to do? What's he going to do? Is he going to eat that food? Is he going to do this or whatever?
Is he going to wait until such and such is eaten? Or?
Yeah. And it turned out to be a really good evening, really fun. And again, barriers were broken down, eroded, nicely as a result. Yeah.
I like the systematized approach to getting someone off their guard by giving them 30 successive shots and seeing if they're still the same person.
That's right. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. So one of the things that we talked about just before we came on air, so to speak, was just how many fascinating businesses are hiding in plain sight within New Zealand. I mean, within our own client base, you've got businesses who 60 years old, they'll employ 100 people. They'll have done so for the last, 60 years, and the people in the building next door to them don't even know what they do.
That's right.
So Who are you excited about? Who are you seeing in the space within New Zealand that you think, geez, that's a story worth telling?
So I can talk company names? Yeah. Okay. Well, some interesting ones that I've been exposed to is, again, things that I've been reading and learning about as I've now out there exploring what might come next for me. Again, first exposed to them some years ago. Not that I have a great intimate knowledge, but Dawn Aerospace. Phenomenal story. I think doing some amazing things. You might think that Rocket Lab is sort of a one-trick pony, a one-hit wonder, shall we say, for New Zealand, but here another company and more behind them are working into this aerospace industry and showing that New Zealand has a role to play in that.
And it's fascinating, right? I mean, I remember that there's another stat which supports the just how clear the airspace over New Zealand is. And it's one thing that you don't even think about as an unfair advantage, but from the perspective of being able to put stuff in the air to test, New Zealand's a brilliant place. Because we don't have through traffic, like we don't have planes flying overhead and whatever else like that, because we are the end point. Another company that is doing some interesting things, particularly around social good, environmental good, is the Pact Group. So recycled plastics. So taking plastics, so it's local supply of the raw material, meaning disposable plastics, but repurposing those into even food grade products. And again, heavy investment into the process, the equipment, materials, the know-how to make that happen. So we're not shipping our plastic overseas anymore as a country, or not as much anyway. And we're repurposing and contributing to that circular economy. So I think what interests me with sort of clean tech businesses like that, and there are some really, really good ones. I mean, Nilo stands out for me as well as one that's, they're turning plastic into adhesive products, which is brilliant, and reintroducing that into the building space. The guys, is it Clean Stone, I think they're called? I'll have to double check on the name of it. But again, turning plastics into finishing products, benchtop products that look absolutely beautiful. They're designed to look like jade and everything else like that. It's amazing. But there is a real driver, I think, within New Zealand, that because we come from such a beautiful small part of the world, that emphasis on actually how much we upweight the environmental aspect, I think is that feels like that could be an unfair advantage for us as well.
I think so too. Yeah. I mean, I think talking with other business people for many, many years, I think again there's a little bit of an unfair view that all New Zealand has to play on globally is primary industries. And no doubt there's an advantage there in the primary industry space. So if you are a manufacturer and you're not producing a dairy product, well, what can you go to market with? But I think that's a fallacy. It really, really is. There are many elements of the New Zealand country brand image that can be worked on. Again, even I'm just thinking about some of the activity going on in the movie making space, right? We've seen online posts about Jason Momoa and Taika Waititi and Cliff Curtis buying studios and these sorts of things. Anything that draws attention to the country and creativity in general, I think helps with manufacturing as well. And particularly in that innovation space, I absolutely agree. I think one of the things that sits around that as well is, what does that leadership context look like that enables that to happen? And you sit at C-level leadership, that's your space. What do you see as the hallmarks of good leadership in the context of manufacturing? I have to say, it probably goes back to that ant analogy in a way. I mean, that balancing, and it's never precision science. Is how much do we spend on exploring and researching and getting things wrong and failing, versus sticking to our knitting and expanding on what we're already doing well. And a leader just has to have the confidence, and ideally an informed confidence with marketing data and consumer trends and economic data. And thankfully, again, we are in a country with our various government ministries and agencies where that kind of data is pretty readily available. And again, as we talked earlier on AI tools can do a lot of crunching for us and summarizing for us to help us see, where are the emerging opportunities, so we can invest at the right point on the curve into the next thing, whatever that will end up being.
I'm going to throw you a question here, which wasn't on the set of things that we talked about before. So this is straight off the script.
Right.
But
Okay.
I've always appreciated your worldview. You have a relatively rounded philosophy on the way that business works and the way that it intersects with all walks of life. Let's say that you are appointed tomorrow the role of New Zealand Minister for Manufacturing.
Right. Okay.
I don't even know if we have one. We might do. We probably do. And you're given the magic wand to say, let's make New Zealand the most recognizable, small, innovative manufacturing industry on the planet. What do we do?
Wow, a lot in that. Well, I have to say, my views come from my time in the public sector, and which was an incredible experience. I learned, because again, going from the Christchurch company into NZTE, your head down, bum up, blinkers on, you're in your own business for 12 years or so. But then when you work inside an organization like NZTE, I've said to people, again, I love analogies, it's like becoming a GP doctor. You're exposed to so many different patients, customers, clients, businesses, and you can pick up so much knowledge from them. Future. So the takeaway for me, that the part that's now become sort of truly part of my own DNA is a few beliefs. I think, one, what's good for New Zealand is good for the world, right? And I think that even though we're a small country, island nation, middle of nowhere, what's good for New Zealand is good for the world. I absolutely believe that. And what's good for New Zealand, I think, is to peel that onion back a bit further, is, I can't say it any other way, is other than high quality jobs.
Yeah.
And that's not just pay. Pay is obviously a part of it, but the working environment, the culture, the development, all of that. Providing high quality jobs to our next generation of workers or an emerging generation of workers is a phenomenally aspirational goal. I mean, it's a great, great goal. How do we keep this country prosperous? And I think manufacturing has a lot of opportunity to do that. Gone are the days is where manufacturing was in a dimly lit factory, hot environment. Manufacturing today can be very high tech, can be very artistic, can be very creative. Computer skills, all those things come into manufacturing. So I think if I was Minister for Manufacturing, started at, primary school level, secondary school level, a bit more speaking up about manufacturing as a future for the country, to sit alongside the primary industries piece. Yeah.
That's so interesting. And we hear the same thing, I think, echoed in the software as a services industry, like getting kids exposed, or that next generation exposed to what's possible. Yeah. And that it doesn't need to be a milk product or a beef product in order for you to have a runway there.
That's right.
That's, I really like that. And that philosophy that what's good for New Zealand is good for the world, that rings so true to me as well. We are at 48 minutes.
Wow.
Where did that go?
Yeah, exactly.
Are there any parting thoughts or words of wisdom that you'd want to share here, other than to read, what was the book? Quiz? About
Quit. Annie Duke, yes, American author. Really, really interesting book. I guess, one gorilla, you might say, in the room is about political situations, and people talking to me now as they hear the American accent and things, what about what's going on in America? Look, I think there's all sorts of reasons why people will revert to caution, and it's over caution. Do you wear your seatbelt on the airplane when there's turbulence? Do you wear your seatbelt during the entire flight? Yes, there's reasonable caution that should be applied. But having said that, I still think there's far more opportunity out there. And I think what I'm sensing is an overemphasis on hesitation. And I just think you can only hold your breath for so long. You need to take a breath. You need to do something. Yeah. And I think it's time for more New Zealand businesses to get out there and start doing something and not waiting for the perfect market conditions. Yeah.
I don't think we can find a better line to wrap that episode up. I love the appetite, the hunger, the confidence in that, and I think if we could create a community where that outlook is shared, I think we would all benefit from it. We would all rise, right?
Great. Yeah. I think so. Yeah.
Well, let's make that happen.
All right. I'm good.
Good stuff.
I'm ready. Yeah.
Thank you so much, John. Really appreciate it.
Likewise, Dale. Thank you for having me. Yeah.
you.